Creep in the street on fake weed. In early 2017, I just moved to a large city in southwest US that enjoys a fair amount of violence and property crime. I'm a skinny white male in my mid to late 20s, not exactly a hardened warrior, and I was trying my best to adjust to this harsh environment. My girlfriend at the time's parents had just bought a house in a quiet neighborhood for her and I to live in. Most of the houses in the area had bars on the windows and doors to prevent burglary. The previous owners had removed the bars from our house prior to selling it, probably because they thought the bars would lower the home's value due to perception of danger. This meant we were one of the only houses in the neighborhood with exposed windows and doors, and to add to that, the house was on a corner next to a road that led straight to a main road. So in the event of a burglary, the getaway would be simple. My ex and I were in the habit of going to a fast food joint every day for lunch before she went to work. We left the house one day and got in the car on our way to get lunch, and I happened to glance over and noticed a man standing on the corner across the street. He's moving erratically, as if waiting eagerly, and seems to be staring directly at us. He's Hispanic, in his mid-20s probably, with a fresh fade haircut, long shorts, and a shirt that was way oversized. The sort of clothes that make you think, maybe this guy's accustomed to doing crimes. I say to my ex, no, we're not going anywhere, let's just go back in. Once back inside, I explained to her my thought process, that this guy on the corner looks like he's stalking the place out for a robbery, waiting for us to leave or something like that. My mind starts racing. I go into emergency freakout mode. I go downstairs into the basement, where a narrow window overlooks the street. I can see the corner where he was standing, and he's no longer there. I see he has crossed the street and is now leaning against a fence diagonal from our house, looking straight at the house. He looks agitated, like he's a little pissed off that we haven't left yet. It looks like he just thinks we've gone in for a second and that we'll be leaving again soon, so he's just waiting for us. I think he must be very stupid to think he's inconspicuous, standing right there looking all antsy and shit. I call the non-emergency police number, and it takes several minutes for them to answer. When they finally pick up, I explain my concern and, to my surprise, they take it pretty seriously. They ask for a description, and if he appears to be on drugs, I know that he appears to be on some kind of stimulants based on his agitated and angsty gestures. The operator tells me that they'll send an officer to check him out, and that's the end of the call. I look out the window and he's gone. Since I feel my house is being actively scoped out for an invasion, and I have several collectible things and adore my cat, I want to do everything I can to prevent that from happening. I go outside and, since I'm new to the neighborhood and suddenly scared, it seems like a great time to introduce myself to the neighbors. I see a guy pull up in a truck across the street, on the corner where I initially saw the creep, so I walk over towards him. As I'm approaching his truck, I see the creep coming down the street towards me. It appears he had taken a stroll around the block and was looping back. I approached the man exiting his truck and introduced myself. He wasn't the neighbor, but some sort of delivery guy. Shit. I start walking back to my house, and somehow the creep isn't walking very fast, so he's behind me. I'm not sure exactly what to do, but I want to show a strong presence of guardianship. I turn on the water hose in the front yard and begin watering the bushes. The creep is slowly slinking by on the sidewalk, looking at me. I look at him and ask, "How's it going, man?" He stops on the sidewalk, directly in front of the house, looks at me and says, "Good." I say, "Just so you know, I'm gonna be here all day." I was working from home at the time, so this was actually true. He's like, "Oh yeah?" and steps into the yard a bit. His body language isn't exactly aggressive. It's just like we were having a normal conversation, which is disturbing to me. The fact that he's so calm and engaging me is unsettling, like he isn't intimidated that I'm calling him out on this. Since he stepped onto a yard a bit, I sort of point around his feet and say, "This is private property." At that point, he appears to take the hint and continues walking down the street. After he's out of sight, I knock on some doors on my block, introduce myself, and explain the whole situation. I think my instincts definitely kicked in, and any shyness or fear of awkward introductions was totally demolished by my drive to survive. I met an old lady across the street, weak, but potentially helpful as a lookout. I continued down the street and spotted a middle-aged Hispanic man talking with a middle-aged white male with a long gray beard. I approached them and introduced myself, then asked if they noticed the creepy guy walking around. Turns out they did, and that's what they were actually discussing about when I walked up. The Hispanic man, Dan, told me he knew where the guy lived and asked if I wanted to get in his truck and go drive by his apartment. I agreed and jumped in his truck, nearly sitting on top of a pistol that was laying on the passenger seat. Yup, he was armed, which was actually a bit of a relief, although I'm not a gun person at all. We drove a few blocks down to the end of the street, and he pointed out what he suspected as the creep's apartment. Sure enough, the creep was leaning against the wall, wearing totally different clothes. Being a criminal mastermind, he decided to run home and change outfits so as to not arouse suspicion. He didn't seem to notice us driving by. Dan said he brought his gun just in case he felt like scaring the shit out of the creep. Dan was a pretty ballsy guy. Apparently, he had seen the creep walking up and down our street earlier in the day. One of the neighbors reported to Dan that the creep was peering into his nephew's truck, which was parked on the street as well. And Dan had scared him away, but he continued to walk up and down the street, as if plotting something that we don't know. We drove back towards our homes, and he dropped me off. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to keep an eye out. During my discussion with the neighbors, I'd also met a proactive young man who lived on the street, who also claimed to have seen the creep. We also exchanged numbers. I was beginning to form a sort of neighborhood watch group of some sorts. I felt pretty cool, actually, but I was still scared. I had fantasies crossing my mind, like what if this guy is part of like a larger gang and he's just a scout of it? I felt like myself and my girlfriend were in danger all the while. My ex is inside the house, getting ready for work. I'm afraid that once she leaves, I'll be home alone in this big empty house, and it will get dark, and this terrifying person will kick the door in, gun in hand. I continue to pace around the house, checking the windows every few minutes for any sight of him. I look out the window and he's standing in the street, directly in front of the house, looking directly at the house. Oh shit, he's threatening me. He thought about what I said earlier, about this being private property, and he's blatantly testing me. Fuck this. I'm calling the cops again. I called a non-emergency number, explaining how this dude I called about earlier is standing right in front of my house now, which definitely seems to be an aggressive gesture, a sort of psychological attack. Again, the operator is really understanding, and she says they'll send someone to talk to him. He disappears. I continue pacing the house, looking out the windows. I see him walk back and forth down the street. He seems to be doing laps around the block. Finally, 2 police cars show up. I can see through the window that they've stopped him a bit down the street, and they're talking to him. I can also see Dan has stopped his truck nearby and is speaking with them as well. There is no way I'm going out there to speak with them while the creep is there, but I watch intently. At some point, the creep walks back towards his apartment. They let him go. I guess they didn't have anything on him, as he hasn't broken any laws, so he was free to roam. I walk outside to speak with the cops. I tell them I'm the one that called and that I don't feel safe. They explained that the guy appeared to be on drugs, said he'd smoked some synthetic marijuana, and he appeared to be hearing voices. Honestly, this was kind of a relief, because I was thinking he was some sort of cunning professional criminal, not a dumbass who smokes marijuana. Still, I don't feel safe. The cops explained that they can't do anything unless he's like actively trespassing or something, or doing some sort of crime. I'm glad they at least talked to him and figured that would dissuade him from continuing to creep around the block, which it did. He didn't come around the block anymore that night. I spoke to Dan after the cops left, and he mentioned how the creep was saying, "I want that truck," to the cops. I couldn't believe I didn't realize it before. The whole time I thought he wanted something in my house, but he was really interested in Dan's nephew's red truck parked on the street. When he was standing in front of my house, I think he was trying to maintain distance from Dan's house. Even still, my adrenaline glands had been through the ringer that day, and I was pretty much in a high state of tension the rest of the night. Our friend came over to hang out completely out of sympathy, so that I wasn't alone and terrified. It might not sound that scary on paper, but the feeling that this individual was targeting me, and then the feeling that he was threatening me personally, after I engaged him, was highly disturbing. Either way, my vigilance and paranoid nature ended up helping out my neighbor and strengthening the bond between the people who lived around me. I got out of that city and am back in the calm liberal city where most of the criminals are the people who don't pick up their dog's poop at the park and fart in yoga class. Anyways, creep in the street on fake weed? Let's not meet. I shut down my neighbor's party, so he threatened and chased me. I'm not even entirely sure this belongs here. If it doesn't, please let me know and I'll delete it immediately. But I wanted to talk a little bit about something that happened to me last Labor Day. For context, at the time, I was in the summer between my senior year of high school and my first year of college. My school started pretty late, so I was still at home with my dad in early September. It's just me and my dad at home, and we don't really celebrate holidays all too much. So when my dad told me he was going to his longtime girlfriend's for the weekend, bringing my Shepherd mix with him, I wasn't too upset. If anything, I was looking forward to having the house to myself, eating whatever I wanted, and having my girlfriend over whenever. My dad lives in a sleepy beach town on the East Coast, in a pretty touristy area that's deserted in the winter, but gets really packed in the summertime, especially with wealthy big shots from the city. As a vacation town, we're pretty used to loud parties, but usually by Labor Day, all the bennies have just about left. It was the night of Labor Day, and I'd just gotten off at a particularly difficult shift at work. I work at a vet, and even on holidays, someone needed to come in to take care of the animals. I made dinner, checked in with my dad, and tried to go to bed around maybe 10 p.m. My block was pretty quiet, but there was one very, very loud party at the house 2 lots down from mine. It was loud enough where I, exhausted as I was, and notoriously good at falling asleep under any circumstances, could not sleep for the life of me. An hour or so passed like that, and I eventually decided to call my dad to see if he had my neighbor's phone number. He said he didn't, and that even if he did, he wouldn't want me talking to the guy anyways. Apparently, he was a lovely combination of obnoxious, creepy, and entitled, and I was alone in the house. Great. He advised me to wait it out until midnight, and if it didn't show any signs of slowing down, to call the police and have them ask him to quiet it down. I expressed some concern for that being rude, but my dad assured me it was very normal and probably expected at loud late-night parties. Sure enough, when midnight rolled around, the party was as loud as ever. I really did consider walking next door to politely ask him to turn it down a little bit, but as an 18-year-old female in pajamas alone at night, I didn't feel quite comfortable approaching a house full of drunk men, so I waited a few extra minutes just in case, and then dialed the police. They showed up maybe 10 minutes later. I watched from my bedroom window as an officer casually walked up to the door and knocked. No one answered. As he walked around to the backyard where everyone was, I could see the yard from my room as well. They seemed to talk for a while, and the party slowed down. Relieved, I went to sleep. Maybe 15 minutes later, I was woken up by music that I swear was even louder than what had been playing previously. I climbed out of my bed, put on my robe, and checked my window. There were less people next door, but the party was definitely going again. Irritated, I didn't hesitate this time before phoning the police. I was speaking to someone different this time, and he asked me for my name and the relation to the house. I expressed some concern, because the lady earlier didn't ask for one, but he said this was procedure, and he wouldn't be told who called, so I told him. I waited again. The second time, it was much the same. The police came, knocked, walked around, talked to the guy. The music was shut off, and after the cops left, it seems like everyone else finally decided to leave. By now, it was maybe 1:30 a.m. I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, but the doorbell ringing. You should know for context that my dad's house is an old boathouse that must be at least 100 years old, and the doorbell is a literal bell, like a school bell. It sits on the wall at the top of the stairs, very grating. More context. The house is 2 stories, and the stairs are directly in front of the front door, meaning when you walk up to the door, there will be a wall to your left, an entrance to the bottom floor living room to your right, and the stairs directly in front of you. This also means that the stairs are the first thing you see when you look through the glass. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor. As was previously mentioned, I am 18 years old, but often get told I look and sound much younger. In my senior year of high school, I got mistaken for a freshman by several freshmen when I offered them directions, and I stand 5'5", with shoes on a good day. On the night of Labor Day, I was wearing nothing but underwear and a short pink bathrobe. My family and even my dog were 2 hours south. I was probably the most vulnerable looking person on the earth. The thing with the doorbell is that he didn't just ring it, he was holding it down. Remember that terrible headache-inducing ringing from the school fire drills? Imagine being woken up to that on repeat in the middle of the night. I climbed out of bed, put on my robe, and went to investigate, leaving my cell phone upstairs and not thinking to bring a weapon of any kind. I go to the top of the stairs, flick on my lights and the outside lights, and see my neighbor standing outside. his finger on the button, and his face absolutely furious. Let's call this lovely man Dave. Dave is maybe 6 feet tall and easily over 200 pounds. He's bald, red in the face, clearly drunk. His face is so close to the glass pane in my door that I can see his breath on it. You would think at this point I would go back upstairs and ignore him until he actually got bored and stuff and left. But at this point I was pissed. Here was this asshole throwing parties and rang my doorbell in the middle of the night, slobbering on my door like I'm the one at fault. I put on my meanest face and stomped down the stairs. I don't know what possessed me to open the door, I really don't. Middle-aged white men make alarm bells go off in my head, and to be drunk on top of that, I blame being exhausted. So I unlock and open the door maybe 2 inches, and wonderful Dave gets his finger in there and flings it open, slamming it on my foot. He then steps 1 step into my foyer, and the other foot is still outside. I say something along the lines of, "What the fuck do you want?" And Dave starts screaming an inch from my face. This all might sound very comical up to this point, but hear me out. I'm here, an 18-year-old female with no one in the house and my door wide open. I'm in a bathrobe and nothing else, and my whole town is practically deserted, except for Dave's house and a family friend on the next block. It is 2 a.m., and I have no phone, no weapon, and no space between me and the drunk, angry, screaming man spitting on my face. I stay silent for the time being, and Dave just continues on and on and on. Some of these things are less alarming. He can't believe the disrespect. My father will hear about this. Isn't he allowed to throw a party, etc., etc., etc.? Some, however, still makes my hair stand on end, that he knows no one is home, that no one can hear us, that I need to be taught a lesson. Comments about my body, my gender, about being a stupid, disrespectful little girl who couldn't stop anything he wanted to do to me. All the while I can feel him moving closer, trying to get his foot farther inside, keeping his hold on the edge of the door. I am not going to go into the details here, but I will tell you that I've experienced with drunk, volatile men, and I know to stay quiet and not provoke him until I had a plan. Don't let him know you're scared. So I just tried to stay there calm and wait for an opportunity. The opportunity came. Marvelous Mr. Dave let go of the door and readjusted his weight to move his hand towards my face. He didn't look like he was going to smack me, so maybe to grab my chin? Luckily, I never had to find out, because as soon as he wasn't putting his force on the door, I stomped on his foot and tried to slam the door in his face. He stopped me very briefly, but he was drunk, and I was full of adrenaline, so I managed to close and lock it. I must have smacked his nose or something, because he stopped to clutch his face and swear, but I didn't even get the chance to take satisfaction, because when he looked up and caught my eye, the look on his face made my blood run cold. He looked like he could have murdered me then there. I've been through a lot of crazy shit, but that look absolutely froze me. Then he started running towards the side of my house. For more house context, there's 3 ways to get inside. The front door that faces the stairs, where we just had our face-off, a back door that leads to a small fenced-off area, where we let the dog out, and a side door, a story up that leads to our, upstairs kitchen, accessible through a flight of steps, up to a wood porch. I locked my doors about 99.9% of the time, but I didn't know for certain if I locked up that night. So when he started running, so did I. I got to the upstairs kitchen door well before him, being younger, sober, and desperate, and confirmed to make sure it was locked. It was. It's a sliding glass door, and since the indoor lights were off, I could see him coming up the stairs a good 20 seconds after I checked it. Dave starts yelling and tries to bang on the door with his bare hands. He does this less than half a dozen times. However, as it probably hurt, but he keeps yelling. I start slowly backing away from him and stand in the doorway watching him watching me. At this point, Dave gets quiet. It's unsettling for a few reasons. One, he's watching me through my door in the middle of the night, and my robe was probably falling off from me sprinting through the house. And he still has that furious, murderous look on his face. Two, Dave is never quiet. I don't know him well, but I know he's one of those guys. I don't know what he was thinking about, and I don't want to know. Or maybe it was just in like a drunken stupor. Who the fuck knows? I start considering my options for one very specific reason. The back door doesn't lock in our defense. We live in a very quiet neighborhood where very little has ever happened. If I knew for a fact that friendly neighbor Dave knew about the door's existence, I would have to run to it and maybe try the chair or the back handle or something like that. However, it was also very possible that Dave didn't know it existed. Like I said, it was at the back of the house, within a fenced-off area with very heavy brush, not immediately visible. Also, the fence runs along the edge of my other neighbor on the other side of the block's property, and it looks from afar it's like a fence separating the two properties, so not so that we can have a dog door. Additionally, Dave's house is really only his summer house, to be honest. He and his family spend most of the year in the big city, from what I can tell, and he spends so much time in the summer and completely wasted that I can't really see him making any impressive observations anyways. Again, this is hard to explain. But this part of the night had to be the scariest for me by far. Him staring at me staring at him, knowing if he runs for the door there might be nothing I could do to stop him from getting inside, but if I run for the door he'll know it exists, if he already doesn't. My phone is still in my bedroom, and I'm scared to leave the kitchen doorway in case he runs while I'm gone, and have no time to prepare. It's just a waiting game now. After what might have been 20 minutes, but was probably about only 5, Dave turns around and leaves. Just like that. I hear him walking down the wood steps from my porch to my side lawn. Slowly and calmly, I run downstairs as fast as I can to get to the side door, just in case, but he never comes. Instead, he walks to my front door, holds down my doorbell for maybe 30 seconds out of spite, and then walks home. I run back to my room and watch him disappear into the house like nothing ever happened. The hysterics start somewhere around here, I think, and my memory is a little fuzzy from this point. It's raining now. I remember leaning against the wall and dramatically sliding down, like in the movies, sitting on the floor, fingers shaking while calling my dad, unable to speak to the point where I can barely communicate that I was safe, but that something had just happened. My dad told me he'd be right there and made the 2-hour drive in a little more than an hour, while I went downstairs and sat on the washing machine facing the back door that did not lock. I was still exhausted, even more so by then, but every time I felt myself nod off, I got that image of Dave's murderous face, and would jump awake. For a reason I really don't understand. I didn't call the police at this time. My dad and his girlfriend got there maybe around 3:30 a.m. with my dog, brought me upstairs, sat me on the couch to tell them everything I did. Exactly, I told them vaguely that he had forced the door open and threatened me, and ended the story there. My dad asked me why I'd been in the laundry room when they came in, and apparently all I said was, "There's no lock." This is basically where the story ends. I fell asleep on the couch with my dad's girlfriend watching over me, and the next morning the 3 of us went to the police station to report the incident. After I found out a few things. One was that, as soon as I fell asleep, my dad walked to Dave's house and rang the much nicer bell until his wife answered. He then demanded she wake up Dave, and told Dave he was going to take a walk with him. He refused, and his adult son smacked my dad in the face and threw him out. The next was something I found out at the police station. At the time, I wasn't really worried about why Dave came to my house just as he was there. The officer we talked to, however, who I'd known since I was 6 years old, small towns work that way, was absolutely furious, and later called to tell us that Dave had asked a younger officer who called so he could go over and apologize, and the officer gave him not only my name, but my address as well. We couldn't take any legal action against Dave, given my minimizing account, and the fact that he had way more money for lawyers than us. He's an exec for a major global investing firm. But I take comfort in knowing that people, and now the police, get called every time Dave has even a small afternoon barbecue, and they come every time, call me petty, but I take pleasure in the small stuff. I haven't told anyone the full story yet of racing Dave to the door, wondering how long I had until he got in. There isn't much more to tell, except for the minor detail that we finally installed a lock on our back door, and I go to school on the other side of the country now. But regardless, Dave, for your sake, let's not meet again. My dog's poop saved me from a creep. Hi, I'm a typical long-time lurker, first-time poster, etc. I know the title sounds odd, but it'll make sense as the story goes on, I promise. Here's some backstory before I begin. I'm a female in my early 20s and go to college kind of far away from home, so when I am home, I spent every possible second with my dog. Over winter break, on the last weekend before the semester started, I took my dog for a joyride and final walk for a while. It had been very snowy that week, but it all melted and it was a rather warm day. I took my dog to this beautiful park, which had a big stone fountain and tons of OP grassy space when you walk in the gates. And behind the fountain are stairs leading up to a reservoir. There's a sidewalk circling the reservoir, which is fairly large, but shouldn't take more than 50 minutes to finish a lap around it. The sidewalk around the reservoir is lined with trees, making it slightly shady and secluded. My dog is a 4-year-old rescue pit bull mix, and has been attacked by other dogs in the past. She is the sweetest dog on earth to people, but is understandably on edge around other dogs. So when I saw other dogs in the grassy fountain area when we arrived, I took her up to the reservoir for her and my peace of mind. She is a very anxious dog, and I'm a very anxious person, but I thought we both deserved a nice walk. But nothing is ever that easy. We see one other person, a 30-something-year-old man, sitting on a bench at the top of the stairs. My dog pulls to go towards him, but being alone up there, I preferred avoidance. My dog also doesn't understand, obviously, that many people don't like pit bulls, and I would hate for someone to try and cause trouble. Our neighbors all love her, and we stop at every house so she can greet her fans, but with strangers, I just keep walking to be safe. The man went down the stairs, so me and my dog were alone now. After walking for maybe 2 minutes, my dog decided she needs to take a massive shit. I fished around for a poop bag and noticed she's drooling like a maniac. With my dog, that means one of two things. 1, she ate something she shouldn't have eaten, or 2, there's a poop still stuck to her butt. I pried her mouth open, praying for option 1, but alas, her butt was covered in shit. I cleaned her as best as I could, but nothing but poop bags at hand, and her drool at that point was dripping everywhere, and was looking a little bubbly as well. I finished cleaning her up and decided to keep walking. I stood up and immediately heard a noise behind me, coming from the direction of the stairs. I expected to see the 30-something-year-old looking normal guy, but was greeted by the sight of a mid-60s-year-old man who was dirty looking. He had snuck up on me somehow out of nowhere and was only a few feet away from me, approaching me slowly. My dog started to sniff him, and I politely said, "Hello." He was a little startled by my dog. He said because she's a pit bull, and I replied that she's friendly. He asked me about her name, age, breed, the normal dog questions, I guess. I answered them nicely enough, but didn't add any unnecessary details because he was giving me a weird vibe. As I'm typing this and recalling that day, I realized he was looking more at me than at my dog, which is a little odd in my opinion because 99% of the time, if you approach a dog, you look at the dog and pet it. However, I don't think he even pet my dog at all. He just kept looking at me. He noticed my dog's drool and seemed hesitant to come closer, thank God, because he thought she had rabies or something. I told him she's fine, without being specific or reassuring, because my gut feeling was getting stronger, and I wanted him to be a little bit scared or uncertain of her. I've been avoiding eye contact with the creeper the whole time, but he suddenly looked me dead in the eyes, and very bluntly, "So, how's your boyfriend doing?" Somehow, I held it together and kept a straight face through that. I could tell he wanted to catch me off guard, but due to my anxiety, I overanalyze every little thing and am rarely, if ever, off guard. As nonchalantly as I could, I replied, "Oh," and I snickered. "He's doing pretty well." I tried to laugh a bit to make the guy feel weird for asking me this weirdly personal question, especially considering he didn't even know my name. He was clearly taken aback by my calm, composed, and quick, but not too quick response, because he instantly got flustered and started stammering about. "Oh yeah, that's so nice. I hate to see you young people single, It's nice to have a partner, you know what I mean. But not a female partner. If you're a girl should be with a nice gentleman, So not only was he a creep, but he was a homophobic creep. I nodded and gave a rather curt along with a small yet ice-cold smile, to show that I was unfazed, even though I was internally shitting myself. Creepy guy then decided to continue on with his losing battle by saying, "How is he?" pointing to my female dog. "Around your boyfriend, is he overprotective?" At this point, he was trying to find a flaw in my story and my composure, but I anticipated that and was prepared. Also, side note, when originally asking about my dog, I corrected him multiple times that my dog is a girl and not a boy, so clearly, he wasn't listening, and just wanted to use my dog as an excuse to talk to me. I gripped my dog's leash and gently pulled her back a bit, subtly reminding him of my dog that he was more than a little afraid of. He looked down and saw her still drooling, and in all honesty, she did look rabid, but unbeknownst to him, she was just still upset about her poop. After I pulled her towards me, I looked right at him and said with the iciest voice and my bitchiest smile, "Oh yes, he is overprotective over me. He absolutely loves my boyfriend, so we're all good. I hope that by calling my dog a boy, he will respect her more? I don't really know." Creeper started stammering again, repeating a lot of what he said above, but thankfully it ended with, "You have a nice day now," to which I replied only thanks. I was not gonna wish this weirdo a good day. I held my breath as he passed me to keep walking around the otherwise empty and secluded reservoir, and as soon as he was far away enough where I didn't think he could catch up to me and my dog, again he was 60 plus and I was in my 20s, I didn't doubt my ability to outrun him if need be, and I bolted to my car, checking behind my shoulder as I went to do that. The scariest part to me is that my family only vaguely knew where I was. They didn't know where exactly that park is, having never been there, nor exactly how far it is from our house. So basically, if he would have grabbed me, it would have taken a while for them to find me. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd been there alone, or even if my dog hadn't looked rabid because of her massive, massive shit.